The rain was relentless that night, not the soft, gentle drizzle that people romanticize in poems, but a heavy, pounding storm that turned the streets into rivers and the sidewalks into slick mirrors. The kind of rain that pressed down on the world, as if trying to wash away its secrets. Ethan pulled his coat tighter around himself as he walked home, each step sinking into puddles that splashed cold water against his boots. His umbrella had broken earlier in the evening, snapped clean against the force of the wind. So now he trudged forward bareheaded, raindrops rolling down his face like tears he hadn't shed in years. He was tired, not just from the long day of construction work, but from the weight of life itself. Being a single father was never easy. Every paycheck stretched too thin, every moment haunted by the absence of his ex-wife. He often told himself to keep going for his daughter, Lily, but sometimes the silence in his small apartment was too loud to bear. And then, just as he passed the corner by the old bakery that had been closed for years, he heard it, a sound that cut through the rain like a broken note in a familiar song. Crying. He stopped in his tracks, his boots splashing in a shallow pool. At first, he thought it was the wind, maybe a squeaky sign bending against the storm. But no, the sound was too raw, too human, a small, trembling cry. Ethan turned his head, scanning the dimly lit street. The flickering street lamp cast long, distorted shadows across the cracked pavement. And there, huddled against the wall of the abandoned shop, was a figure, a child. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. Her dress was soaked, clinging to her tiny frame, her hair plastered against her forehead. She hugged her knees tightly to her chest as if trying to disappear into herself, shivering from the cold. Ethan's heart clenched. For a moment he froze, caught between instinct and hesitation. In today's world, a lone man approaching a crying child in the dark could easily be misunderstood. He had seen enough headlines to know how quickly good intentions could be twisted. But then the girl lifted her face. Her eyes, wide, terrified, and glistening with tears, met his. And in that instant, every doubt evaporated. He saw something in those eyes that shook him to his core. Not just sadness, but desperation. He slowly crouched down a few feet away, careful not to startle her. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice almost drowned out by the rain. "Are you all right? Where's your family?" The girl didn't answer at first. She just stared at him, lips quivering, her small body trembling, like a leaf caught in a storm. He noticed the faint bruises on her arm, half hidden under the sleeve of her dress. His chest tightened. "It's okay," Ethan continued, his tone gentle, the same way he spoke to Lily whenever she had nightmares. "I'm not here to hurt you. You're safe now." Hesitated, then slowly uncurled her knees, though her hands still gripped the hem of her dress like she was holding on to the last thread of control. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. Her lips moved, barely forming the words. Sophie." Ethan gave a small nod. "That's a beautiful name, Sophie." "My name's Ethan." He paused, studying her face the way she avoided his eyes. "Are you lost? Do you need me to call someone?" That's when it happened. She leaned forward, her tiny frame shaking, and whispered something so faint he almost didn't catch it. But when he did, his heart nearly stopped. "They'll find me," she whispered, her voice trembling like a broken cord. "Please, don't let them take me back." Ethan froze, the rain hammering around them, his breath caught in his throat. Her words weren't the kind a child should ever have to say. "Who, Sophie?" he asked carefully, his voice low and steady. "Who are you talking about?" Her eyes darted around the empty street as if shadows themselves might come alive and drag her away. Then she leaned closer, clutching his sleeve with tiny, desperate fingers. "My father," she whispered. "Please don't let him find me." The words struck Ethan like lightning. A father, not a stranger. Not some random danger lurking in the night. Her own father. For a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. He could feel his pulse pounding in his ears, the storm now matching the chaos inside his chest. His mind flashed to Lily, safe at home, and the thought of her ever looking at him with such fear made him feel physically sick. The little girl's grip on his sleeve tightened. Her lips trembled as fresh tears streamed down her cheeks, blending with the rain. Ethan knew right then that his life was about to change. Whatever road he chose next, there was no going back. He took a deep breath, swallowing the lump in his throat, and made a silent vow to himself. No matter what this means, no matter what danger it brings, I cannot walk away. The storm raged on, but inside, Ethan had found a clarity he hadn't felt in years. And as he reached out his hand to Sophie, offering her shelter from both the rain and the nightmare she carried, he had no idea that this single moment would pull him into the darkest battle of his life. The rain showed no mercy. By the time Ethan helped Sophie to her feet, both of them were soaked to the bone. He draped his jacket around her small shoulders, though it did little against the cold, and guided her carefully down the empty street. Every few steps, she flinched at sudden noises, the crash of thunder, the splash of water from a passing car. Ethan noticed how tightly she gripped the sleeve of his shirt, as though letting go would mean vanishing into the night. "Don't worry," he reassured, his voice low and steady. "We'll get you somewhere warm. Somewhere safe." But in truth, Ethan wasn't entirely sure where safe was. He thought about the police station a few blocks away. That would be the logical place to go. Report a missing child, let the system handle it. That's what anyone would do, right? Yet her words kept echoing in his mind. "Please don't let them take me back." The fear in her voice had been real, raw in a way no child could fake. Ethan knew that kind of fear. He'd seen it once before, years ago, in his younger brother's eyes before the boy had run away from their abusive father. A memory Ethan had buried deep, but which now clawed its way back to the surface. Sophie stumbled slightly, her bare feet slipping on the wet pavement. Without thinking, Ethan scooped her up into his arms. She was so light, far too light for a child her age. His stomach twisted. "You're going to be all right," he murmured. "I promise." By the time they reached his apartment, both were shivering uncontrollably. Ethan unlocked the door with fumbling fingers and ushered Sophie inside. The small living room smelled faintly of coffee and sawdust, remnants of Ethan's life as a carpenter, always juggling side projects to make ends meet. He quickly grabbed a towel and knelt down in front of Sophie, gently drying her hair. She sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar space like a frightened animal. Even the soft ticking of the wall clock made her shoulders tense. "Here," Ethan said, handing her a blanket. "Wrap yourself in this. I'll get some warm clothes for you." When he returned with one of Lily's old pajamas, Sophie hesitated before taking them. "They're not mine," she whispered. Ethan gave a small smile. "They used to belong to my daughter. She's about your age. I think they'll fit just fine." That seemed to reassure her, if only slightly. She disappeared into the bathroom, and when she returned, she looked almost like a different child. Still fragile, but no longer shivering. Ethan handed her a steaming mug of hot cocoa, the cheap kind he kept for Lily's sleepovers. Sophie cupped it carefully, as though afraid she might break it, and took a small sip. A faint color returned to her cheeks. For a long while, neither spoke. The rain tapped against the windows, filling the silence. Finally, Ethan leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Sophie," he said gently, "I need to understand what's going on. Why were you out there in the rain? Why don't you want to go back to your father?" Her hands trembled, nearly spilling the cocoa. She set the mug down on the table and stared at the floor. "Because," her voice cracked, tears welling in her eyes. "Because he hurts me." Ethan's breath caught. He had suspected, but hearing the words was like a punch to the gut. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and pleading. "If you tell the police, they'll send me back. They always send kids back. And then, he'll—" Her words trailed off into silence, but the terror in her expression finished the sentence for her. Ethan swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that the system worked, that justice would protect her. But deep down, he knew the truth. He'd seen too many stories of children failed by those meant to protect them. He thought of Lily again. If she were in Sophie's place, would he risk handing her over to strangers, trusting them to keep her safe? Or would he do whatever it took to protect her himself? Ethan rubbed his face with his hands, feeling the storm outside mirrored within him. He wasn't equipped for this. He was just a carpenter, a widowed father struggling to stay afloat. And yet, Here was this little girl looking at him as if he were her last hope. "I believe you," he said finally, his voice firm, "and I won't let anyone hurt you." Not again, Sophie blinked at him, stunned. For the first time, a flicker of trust softened her features. "Thank you," she whispered. It was such a simple phrase, yet it carried the weight of a lifeline. Later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep curled up on the couch, Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the rain. His thoughts were a whirlwind. He knew this wasn't sustainable. He couldn't just hide Sophie forever. Her father would come looking, and if what she said was true, he was dangerous. Ethan had to find a way to protect her without putting Lily, or himself, at risk. But as he glanced back at the sleeping child, her face finally peaceful under the dim glow of the lamp, Ethan felt a surge of determination. Life had taken so much from him already. Maybe this was fate's way of giving him a chance to make things right, of saving someone the way he once wished someone had saved his brother. One thing was clear: whatever storm lay ahead, Ethan had already chosen his side. And for the first time in years, he felt something stronger than grief. He felt purpose. The storm had finally passed by morning, leaving behind damp streets and the faint smell of earth. Sunlight streamed weakly through the blinds, painting pale stripes across Ethan's modest living room. Sophie stirred on the couch, the blanket tangled around her small frame. For a fleeting moment, she looked like any other child, safe, dreaming, innocent. Ethan almost allowed himself to believe it was over, that she could stay here and life would somehow continue. But then came the knock. It was sharp, impatient. Ethan froze. He glanced at the clock. Too early for the mailman, too forceful for a neighbor. His pulse quickened. Quietly, he moved toward the door and peered through the peephole. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair slicked back in a way that made his face look harder, colder. His eyes scanned the hallway like a predator searching for prey. Ethan didn't need to ask. He knew. This was Sophie's father. The man knocked again, louder this time. Sophie jolted awake, her wide eyes instantly darting toward the door. She didn't ask who it was. She didn't need to. Her trembling lips whispered, "He found me." Her fear was unmistakable. Ethan pressed a finger to his lips, silently telling her to stay quiet. He waited, muscles tense, as the knocking turned into pounding. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the sound stopped. Silence. But Ethan didn't relax. He knew men like that didn't just walk away. They circled. They waited. Later that day, Ethan tried to keep things normal. He made pancakes for breakfast, slightly burnt at the edges, but Sophie didn't complain. In fact, she smiled faintly as she drizzled syrup over her plate. It was the first time Ethan had seen her smile, yet even in that moment, her eyes flicked nervously toward the window, as though expecting her father's face to appear at any second. Ethan realized the truth. No matter what he did, she would never truly feel safe until the threat was gone. By afternoon, Ethan faced a difficult choice. Should he call the authorities? Report what happened? He sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. Every scenario played out in his mind. If he called, the police might listen. They might take Sophie into protective custody. But what if they didn't believe her? What if her father had connections? Or if the case slipped through the cracks like so many others? And then there was Lily. His daughter would be home from her mother's soon. How could he explain this? Bringing a frightened girl into their lives, with a dangerous man lurking nearby. It wasn't just his safety at stake anymore. His phone buzzed suddenly, startling him. It was a text from his ex-wife, Sarah. "Lily's excited for the weekend." Don't forget her ballet shoes. Ethan stared at the screen, torn between his responsibilities as a father and the silent plea in Sophie's eyes. Could he really turn her away? When that evening, Sophie finally spoke more about her past. She sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, her voice barely above a whisper. "He gets angry about little things. If I spill water, if I laugh too loud, he says I'm ungrateful, that I remind him of. She trailed off, shaking her head. Remind him of who? Ethan asked gently. My mom. The word hung heavy in the air. Ethan's chest tightened. She left when I was 5, Sophie continued. He told me it was my fault. He said she couldn't stand me. Tears welled in her eyes, but she forced herself to go on. When he drinks, it's worse. He locks the doors so I can't leave. He says no one else would ever want me. That I belong to him. Ethan clenched his fists under the table. Every word was another wound, another scar carved into her young life. He wanted to march straight to that man and make him pay. But he also knew anger alone wouldn't protect her. He leaned closer. Listen to me, Sophie. Nothing he said is true. You didn't make your mom leave. You're not ungrateful. And you don't belong to him. Her lip quivered. Then, where do I belong? The question pierced Ethan's heart. He didn't have the answer. Not yet. Yucko that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep again, Ethan sat in the dark, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. He picked up a framed photo from the shelf, a picture of Lily laughing in the park, her hair tangled by the wind. Being a father was the hardest thing he'd ever done, but it was also the only thing that had ever truly mattered. And now fate had placed another child in his path. He whispered to the empty room as though speaking to his late wife. What am I supposed to do, Emily? If you were here, you'd know. You'd see the right choice, but only silence answered. The next morning, as Ethan walked Sophie to the small corner store for groceries, he felt eyes on him. He glanced over his shoulder. For just a moment, he caught sight of a dark sedan parked at the corner, a man sitting inside watching. His heart lurched. The storm was far from over. It was only just beginning. The weekend came faster than Ethan expected. The morning sun glared off his windshield as he pulled into Sarah's driveway, his stomach tied in knots. Normally, picking up Lily was the highlight of his week. Today, though, he carried a secret, a frightened child hidden in his apartment, and a dangerous man hunting for her. Sarah greeted him at the door, her expression soft but cautious, as it always was when they saw each other. Divorce had dulled the warmth between them, though the shared love for Lily kept a fragile bridge intact. She's all packed, Sarah said, handing Ethan a small pink duffel bag. Ballet shoes are in there. Don't forget this time. Ethan managed a half smile. Got it! And then Lily bounded out, 7 years old, full of light, her ponytail bouncing as she ran straight into her father's arms. Her laughter filled a space in Ethan's chest he hadn't realized was hollow. But as he buckled her into the car seat, his mind churned. How could he explain Sophie? How could he risk Lily's innocence by bringing her into the middle of this storm? Back at the apartment, Sophie sat nervously on the couch, clutching her blanket like a shield. When the door opened and Lily rushed inside, the two girls froze, staring at each other like strangers from different worlds. Lily was open, curious. Hi, who are you? Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. I'm Sophie. Ethan stepped in quickly, his tone gentle. Sophie's a friend. She's staying with us for a little while. Lily tilted her head, puzzled, but didn't question further. Children had a way of accepting what adults overcomplicated. Still, Ethan felt the tension in the room. Two worlds colliding. One child who had known safety and love, another who had known fear and shadows. The afternoon passed in awkward fragments. Lily pulled out her coloring books, spreading crayons across the floor. Sophie watched quietly, hesitant to join. Eventually, Lily slid a page toward her. Want to color with me? Sophie hesitated, then nodded. Minutes later, the two girls sat side by side, scribbling rainbows and butterflies. For the first time, Ethan saw Sophie's shoulders relax. Her face softened, the faintest spark of childhood returning. But it was fragile, like a candle flickering in the wind. That night, as Ethan tucked both girls into bed, Lily in her room, Sophie on the couch, he overheard a small exchange. Lily whispered, "Don't be scared. My dad's the strongest. He'll keep you safe." Ethan froze in the hallway, his throat tightening. He hadn't realized Lily saw him that way. In her eyes, he was a protector, and now Sophie was depending on him too. The weight of it was almost unbearable. But the shadows hadn't lifted. The next day, as Ethan walked the girls to the park, he noticed the same black sedan parked nearby. His skin prickled. He guided the girls toward the swings, trying to mask his unease. Sophie's laughter, soft, hesitant at first, grew as Lily pushed her higher. It was a sound Ethan hadn't heard before. Joy breaking through fear. Then he saw it. A man standing by the tree line, watching. The same cold eyes, the same slicked hair. Sophie's father. Ethan's heart pounded. He turned to the girls, forcing a smile. "Come on, time to head home." They protested, but his tone left no room for argument. He packed them up quickly, scanning the park with every step. The man didn't follow, but the message was clear. He could reach them anytime he wanted. That evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table long after the girls had gone to bed. His hands trembled as he gripped his phone. Should he call the police now? Tell Sarah? Move to a hotel? Every option carried risk. But then he remembered Sophie's words. He says no one would ever want me. If he turned her over to the system, would that only prove her father right? Would she believe she really was unwanted? He stared at the closed bedroom door where Lily slept peacefully. He had to protect her. But could he really live with himself if he abandoned Sophie? Two worlds had collided under his roof, and somehow he had to find a way to keep them both safe. The next morning began deceptively calm. Lily hummed at the kitchen table, carefully spreading jelly over her toast. Sophie sat opposite her, hands folded neatly, as if unsure whether she was allowed to eat. Ethan coaxed her gently, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her. "Go ahead, Sophie." "You don't need to ask here." She blinked at him, then at the food as if the concept of kindness was foreign. Finally, she picked up her fork. Ethan forced a smile, but inside his nerves buzzed like live wires. Every sound outside made his head snap toward the window. Every car engine made his pulse race. Because he knew, the man from the park wasn't just watching anymore. He was circling. That evening, Sarah called. Her voice was clipped, laced with suspicion. "Ethan, Lily told me there's another girl staying at your place." "Who is she?" Ethan's chest tightened. He glanced toward the living room, where Sophie and Lily were curled up watching cartoons. He lowered his voice. "She's a friend of Lily's. Just for a couple of days." "A friend of Lily's?" Sarah's tone sharpened. "Since when does a 7-year-old bring house guests without me knowing?" "Ethan, what's going on?" He closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. How could he explain? How could he tell her the truth without opening a storm he couldn't control? "I'll explain soon. I promise. Just trust me on this." But Sarah didn't reply right away. The silence said enough. "Don't make me regret this," she finally said before hanging up. The weight of her doubt cut deep. That night the knock came. 3 hard raps on the door, echoing through the apartment like gunshots. Ethan's heart froze. He turned toward the living room, where the girls stared wide-eyed. Lily whispered, "Daddy?" "Go to your room," Ethan said quickly, his voice sharper than he intended. "Now!" The knock came again. Louder. Ethan's breath caught as he edged toward the door. He didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was, but he did anyway. And there he stood, Sophie's father, his smirk venomous, his eyes glinting under the dim hallway light. "Open up," the man drawled, voice muffled through the wood. "I know she's in there." Ethan's hand hovered over the lock, every instinct screaming at him. He whispered to himself, "Don't. Don't give him what he wants." The man leaned closer, pressing his forehead against the door. "You can't hide her from me. She's mine. You hear me? Mine." Sophie whimpered from the bedroom, the sound slicing through Ethan's chest. The man chuckled low, like he was savoring the fear leaking through the walls. "You think you can protect her? You're a joke. A washed-up dad who can't even keep his own family together." The insult hit deep, but Ethan clenched his fists. He refused to move. Finally, after what felt like hours, the footsteps receded. Silence fell. But Ethan knew it wasn't over. It was only the beginning. When he returned to the bedroom, both girls clung to each other wide-eyed. Sophie's face was pale, her small hands trembling. "Was it him?" she whispered. Ethan knelt down, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Yes, but listen to me. He is not getting near you. Not while I'm here." Sophie's lip quivered. "He always does. He always finds me." Ethan pulled her close, holding both girls against his chest. He could feel their tiny hearts pounding like frightened birds. And in that moment, a vow crystallized inside him. If Sophie's father wanted her back, he'd have to go through him first. But even as he tried to soothe them, doubts gnawed at Ethan's resolve. How long could he keep this up? How long before Sarah demanded answers? Before the police knocked on his door instead? How long before Sophie's father escalated from knocking to breaking? The thought made his stomach twist. Later, when the girls finally fell asleep, Lily curled with her stuffed rabbit, Sophie clutching her threadbare blanket. Ethan sat in the dark living room, his fists trembling. He wasn't just fighting for custody weekends anymore. He was fighting for something much bigger, for innocence, for trust, for the fragile hope of two little girls who believed he could protect them. And he wasn't sure he was strong enough. The next 2 days were a blur of fear and fragile routines. Ethan still got Lily ready for school, still packed lunches, still forced himself to smile as if nothing was wrong. But every step he took felt heavier. Every hallway glance felt watched. At night, he sat awake with a baseball bat leaning against the couch, listening for footsteps outside his door. And every time he closed his eyes, Sophie's whisper echoed in his head. "He always finds me." On the third morning, Sarah showed up. Ethan opened the door to see her standing there, arms crossed, face tense. "Ethan," she said flatly, "we need to talk." He swallowed. "Now's not the best time." She raised an eyebrow. "Not the best time? My daughter tells me she's sharing her room with some strange girl, and you think I'm just going to drop it?" Ethan stepped aside reluctantly, and Sarah brushed past him, her perfume mixing with the faint smell of coffee and worry in the apartment. She froze when she saw Sophie sitting quietly at the table, staring down at her folded hands. Sarah's eyes darted back to Ethan. "Who is she?" Ethan hesitated. The truth clawed at his throat, desperate to come out. But so did the fear. "She's someone who needed help," he managed. Sarah narrowed her eyes. "Needed help? Ethan, you can't just bring strange kids into your home. Do you even realize what you're risking? For Lily? For custody?" The word hit like a slap. Custody. As if she was already preparing to use this against him. "Sarah, please," he said, lowering his voice. "It's not what you think." "She's in danger." Sarah crossed her arms tighter. "From who?" Ethan opened his mouth, but before he could answer, Sophie suddenly pushed her chair back and ran down the hallway, disappearing into Lily's room. Sarah's expression hardened. "You're hiding something. And I swear, if this puts Lily in danger..." She stopped, choking back her words, as if afraid of what she'd say next. Finally, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'm calling my lawyer," she said coldly. "If you don't clean this up, Ethan, you're going to lose everything." The door slammed, leaving Ethan in a silence so heavy it felt suffocating. Just that night, the storm returned. Not just the rain, but the man. Ethan had just tucked the girls into bed when he heard it. The scrape of something metallic against the doorframe. A lockpick? Or just intimidation? His chest tightened. He grabbed the bat, crept toward the door, and called out, voice shaking, "Leave us alone." A chuckle echoed through the wood. "Come on, man. You really think you can play hero? You've got no idea what she's worth." The words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Worth? This wasn't just a cruel father. There was something bigger, something darker. The man leaned against the door, voice dripping with venom. "Hand her over and I walk away. Pretend none of this ever happened. You keep your precious little girl, your pathetic life, everything. All you gotta do is open the door." Ethan's grip on the bat tightened until his knuckles went white. His voice cracked, but he forced the words out. She's not yours anymore. She's not anyone's to own silence. Then a fist slammed into the door so hard the frame rattled. Sophie gasped from the bedroom. Lily screamed. You don't know who you're messing with, the man roared. Ethan braced himself, certain the lock would give way. But then, just as suddenly, the pounding stopped, and the hallway fell silent again. When Ethan dared to look through the peephole, the man was gone. But taped to the door was a note. Just 4 words written in thick black marker. You can't protect her. Ethan's stomach dropped. His whole body shook. He crumpled the note in his fist, breathing hard, fighting the urge to collapse right there on the floor. Behind him, Lily appeared, clutching her rabbit, tears streaking down her cheeks. Daddy, she whispered, are we safe? Ethan forced himself to kneel, wiping her tears with trembling hands. Yes, he lied softly. As long as I'm here, you're safe, but deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. That night, after the girls finally cried themselves to sleep, Ethan sat in the dark again, the crumpled note burning in his pocket. He realized this was no longer about temporary shelter. This was war, and unless he found out the truth about Sophie's past, about why her father wanted her so badly, he was going to lose, not just Sophie, but Lily too. The sleepless night left Ethan hollow-eyed, but something in him had shifted. Fear had kept him paralyzed for too long. Now, after that note, he knew one thing. If he didn't fight back, he'd lose everything. He started with the obvious. While Lily was at school and Sophie was coloring quietly at the table, Ethan opened his old laptop. His fingers hovered over the keys, heart pounding, before he typed her name. Sophie Harper. At first, nothing. Too common. Too many results. But then, buried in a local news article from 3 years ago, he saw it. A family business fraud scandal. A man arrested but later released due to insufficient evidence. His name, Richard Harper. Ethan's stomach clenched. Sophie's father. The article described him as a respected businessman with rumored ties to illegal trafficking, money laundering, exploitation, and next to him in a faded photo was a young girl, maybe 6 or 7, her face blurred by time, but Ethan knew those eyes. Sophie's. Ethan leaned back, running a hand down his face. This isn't just a custody battle, he realized. This is something darker, something criminal. Before he could process it further, Sophie's small voice broke the silence. Do you believe me? She asked, her crayon pausing mid-stroke. Ethan blinked. What do you mean? She lifted her drawing, a childlike picture of a girl hiding under an umbrella, with a shadowy figure towering above her. Nobody ever believes me, she whispered. They think I make things up. Ethan's throat tightened. Sophie, what did he do to you? Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she pressed her lips together, shaking her head. Then, after a long silence, she whispered something that made Ethan's blood run cold. He says I'm the only thing that keeps his world together. That I'm his treasure? That night, Sarah called. Her voice was clipped, professional. Ethan, I've been thinking. If you don't tell me what's going on, I'm filing for emergency custody. Ethan rubbed his forehead, torn between desperation and fury. Sarah, listen to me. Sophie isn't safe. Her father is dangerous. More dangerous than you realize. Sarah scoffed. And you found all this out, how? Some Google search? Do you hear yourself? This sounds insane, Ethan. Insane or not, Ethan shot back. He came to my door. He threatened Lily. Do you think I'd make this up? There was silence on the line. For a moment, Ethan thought maybe she believed him. But then she said softly, You've always been a good father, Ethan. But sometimes, good fathers lose their way. Click. The line went dead. Ethan's hands trembled. Sarah wasn't going to help. She might even use this against him. Later that evening, as thunder rolled outside, Sophie approached him with a folded piece of paper. I kept this, she said shyly. It was an old photograph, faded, creased, It showed Sophie as a toddler on her father's lap. But the strange part wasn't the smile on Richard Harper's face. It was what he was holding. A thick, leather-bound ledger. Numbers, names, codes. Ethan didn't understand it all, but one word caught his eye at the bottom of the page. Shipment. His chest tightened. He realized now, Sophie wasn't just running from abuse. She was running from secrets her father couldn't afford to lose. Secrets she might not even fully understand. That night, Ethan sat awake, staring at the photo, while Sophie and Lily slept peacefully in the next room. And for the first time, he realized this wasn't just about keeping Sophie hidden. It was about exposing the truth. Because if Richard Harper was willing to threaten, stalk, and terrify a man like Ethan just to get Sophie back, then maybe Sophie was the key to unraveling something much bigger, something worth killing for. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, but Ethan felt no warmth. He sat hunched over the table, staring at the old photograph Sophie had given him. The ledger in Richard Harper's lap, the word shipment scrawled at the bottom. His instincts screamed at him. This wasn't just a family dispute. It was a web of crime, money, and power. But how could he prove it? And worse, how could he protect Sophie from a man who had resources, influence, and no conscience? A sharp knock jolted him from his thoughts. Ethan froze. Another knock, louder this time. He peeked through the curtain. Two men in dark suits stood outside. Not the police, not neighbors. These men radiated the kind of cold confidence that comes from being untouchable. One of them glanced up at the window. Their eyes met. Ethan's blood ran cold. He backed away, heart pounding, as the knock turned into a heavy bang. Bang! Bang! "Mr. Cole," a deep voice called, "we need to talk." Sophie appeared in the hallway, clutching Lily's stuffed bear. Her face went pale. "It's them," she whispered. "He sent them." Ethan motioned for her to stay quiet. The men outside tried the handle, rattled it, pushed hard against the wood. Then after a long pause, silence. Ethan waited, barely breathing. Minutes crawled by. Finally, the sound of retreating footsteps, a car engine, then nothing. But the message was clear. Richard Harper wasn't waiting anymore. That night, Ethan called Sarah again. His voice shook with urgency. "Sarah, listen to me. This isn't just about Sophie being scared. Harper has people, dangerous people watching us. They came to my door, but Sarah's response was ice. Ethan, I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm filing papers. If you don't hand Sophie over, I'll make sure you lose custody of Lily." Her words were a knife to his chest. "Sarah, please. This isn't about winning or losing. Lily could be in danger too." But Sarah wasn't listening. Her silence said it all. She thought he was unraveling. Click. Another line severed. Another betrayal. Hours later, Ethan tucked Sophie and Lily into bed, whispering reassurances he barely believed himself. But just as he stepped back into the living room, his phone buzzed. A message. No name. No number. Just a photo. Of Lily. Taken that very afternoon, outside her school. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His vision tunneled. And then another message appeared. Last chance. Return what's mine. Ethan sank to his knees, gripping the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. This wasn't a warning anymore. This was a promise. Richard Harper had moved past intimidation. Now he was coming straight for Ethan's heart. That night, as rain lashed against the windows, Ethan sat in the dark, staring at the two sleeping girls. Sophie curled up tightly as if bracing for monsters. Lily's tiny hand resting against her cheek. He whispered to himself, "Over my dead body." And for the first time, he wasn't just thinking it. He was ready to make it true. The night was heavy with silence. Not even the crickets dared to sing. Ethan stood by the window, staring at the street below. A black car sat parked across the road, its headlights off, its windows tinted. They weren't hiding anymore. He clenched his fists. Fear clawed at his insides, but another fire burned hotter. Anger. Richard Harper thought he could toy with lives, with children, and walk away untouched. Not tonight. At 2 a.m., when the girls were asleep, Ethan slipped outside. The air smelled of damp earth, thick with storm clouds waiting to burst. He moved like a shadow, each step deliberate, until he was standing right before the car. The driver's window slid down. A man in a suit smirked. "Mister, Ethan, the boss is expecting you." Ethan swallowed hard, his reflection in the glass warped by rain. He slid into the back seat. The door locked behind him with a hollow click. The drive felt endless. The city lights blurred past, swallowed by fields, then woods, until finally, the car slowed. Ahead stood a mansion, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. Iron gates creaked open, and the vehicle rolled onto a cobblestone driveway. Richard Harper was waiting. He stood on the porch in a tailored suit, sipping a glass of wine as though it were just another business deal. His hair slicked back, his expression calm. Too calm. "Mister Ethan," he said smoothly, raising his glass, "you've been playing house with something that doesn't belong to you." Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady though his heart thundered. "She's not property. She's your daughter, and she's terrified of you." Richard's smile didn't falter. He swirled the wine. "Children are emotional creatures. They say things they don't mean. Sophie will adjust. With the right discipline." The word discipline made Ethan's blood boil. He took a step closer. "You send men to my home. You take pictures of my little girl. You think this ends with you scaring me?" Richard chuckled, a dark, hollow sound. "Ends? No, Ethan. This ends when you hand her over, or when you lose everything else you love." The room behind Richard glowed faintly, and Ethan glimpsed something on the wall. A massive framed photo, Richard shaking hands with city officials, police chiefs, men of power, proof of how deep his reach went. Ethan's stomach turned. No wonder nobody believed him. But then his eyes shifted to the corner of the porch, a security camera, its red light blinking, recording every second. An idea sparked. Ethan raised his voice, his words sharp and deliberate. "You think you can hurt children and hide behind your money? You think scaring a single father makes you powerful?" Richard's smile cracked. "Careful, mister Ethan." But Ethan pressed on, every syllable echoing into the night. "You don't deserve to call yourself her father. And I won't let you destroy her life the way you've destroyed everything else." Richard's mask slipped. His jaw tightened, his hand gripped the railing, his wineglass shattered against the porch. And in that instant, the mask of the smooth billionaire was gone. What stood before Ethan was the predator Sophie had feared all along. He lunged forward, his voice venomous. "You think you can defy me? I own this town, and I can take that girl from you whenever I please." The words were out, on camera, recorded. Ethan's heart pounded. He had it. The truth spoken by Richard himself. Ere before Harper could say more, headlights blazed at the end of the driveway. Police cruisers. 3 of them. Sirens cut through the silence. Richard froze. His eyes widened. Ethan's voice was calm now, almost quiet. "You should have been more careful who was listening, Richard." Because Ethan hadn't come alone. Before leaving, he'd sent Sophie's ledger pages and his location to one person he still trusted, an old journalist friend who owed him a favor. The police weren't here to protect Harper this time. They were here because of him. Chaos erupted. Officers spilled out, shouting commands. Richard's men drew weapons, but they were quickly overpowered. And Richard himself, hands still trembling from his outburst, was shoved against the railing and cuffed. For the first time, the man looked small, powerless. As he was dragged away, his eyes locked on Ethan's, burning with hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. But Ethan only turned, walking back toward the car that would take him home. Because tonight, It was. The first rays of morning broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of soft gold and pale pink. Ethan sat on the front porch of his modest house, the air cool and damp from last night's storm. For the first time in weeks, he could breathe without looking over his shoulder. Inside, through the window, he could see Sophie curled up on the couch, asleep with a blanket pulled tight around her. Her little chest rose and fell with the peace of a child who finally believed she was safe. Beside her, Lily had fallen asleep too, her arm protectively draped over her sister. Ethan's heart swelled. His girls, his family. But peace always feels fragile after chaos. His mind replayed the night again and again. Richard Harper's venom, the shattering glass, the flashing red light of the camera, the sirens that broke the spell of fear. Richard was gone now, arrested, charged. But Ethan knew men like him didn't simply disappear. They had influence, allies, ways of slipping through cracks. Still, something had changed. For the first time, Sophie wasn't alone in her battle. She wasn't just a terrified girl in the rain. She had someone who stood up for her, who chose her, who listened, and that made all the difference. Hours later, the girls stirred awake. Lily rubbed her eyes, yawning, then leaned against her dad. Sophie sat quietly, her fingers fiddling with the edges of her blanket. Finally, she whispered, "Is he really gone?" Ethan pulled her close, brushing damp strands of hair from her forehead. "He can't hurt you anymore," he said softly. "Not while I'm here." Sophie's lip trembled, and then she melted into him, sobbing quietly. Not with fear this time, but with release, with relief. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. She wasn't trapped. She wasn't invisible. She was safe. That night, Ethan tucked both girls into bed. He lingered a little longer at Sophie's side, smoothing the blanket. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, still unsure if she deserved this kind of care. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was fragile, but curious. Ethan smiled faintly. "Because no child should ever cry alone in the rain." Her lips curled into the smallest smile he had seen from her yet. She whispered something so soft he almost missed it. "Thank you, Dad." The word hit him like a wave. He froze, tears stinging his eyes. Then he leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered back, "You're home now." Weeks passed. The town buzzed with whispers of Richard Harper's arrest. Newspapers printed headlines about corruption, hidden ledgers, and the empire of fear he had built. Some still doubted, some still feared his reach. But Ethan didn't care, because at his dinner table now sat two giggling girls, laughing over burnt pancakes, arguing over crayons, singing silly songs at night. And for the first time in years, the house was full of life again. One evening, Ethan sat with the girls under the stars. The night was quiet, the air warm. "Life," he said softly, more to himself than to them, "isn't about what we lose. It's about who we choose to stand for." Even when it costs us everything, Sophie leaned against him, her eyes reflecting the stars. Lily nestled close too. And in that moment, Ethan realized something profound. Family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes, family is the one you fight for. The camera of life faded out there. A single father, once broken and weary, now holding on to the fragile, beautiful truth that love, chosen, fought for, protected, was stronger than power, fear, or money.